We welcomed them into our living rooms for decades, but how well did we really know our screen heroes? Behind the legendary strength of Gary Cooper and the magical smile of Elizabeth Montgomery lay devastating diagnoses they chose to carry completely alone. In the golden eras of Hollywood and television, showing vulnerability was an unspoken sin, so these beloved stars suffered in silence to protect the magic we fell in love with. Today, we look past the silver screen to uncover the bittersweet, untold final battles of 8 legendary actors, revealing the heartbreaking secrets behind their quiet exits. Gary Cooper, the silent courage of an American icon. To those who grew up watching Gary Cooper in High Noon, he wasn't just a movie star. He was the very definition of American stoicism. With his towering frame and quiet resolve, Coop built a legendary career playing honorable men who faced down impossible odds without uttering a useless word. As it turned out, that quiet dignity wasn't an act. In April 1961, the Academy honored Cooper with a Lifetime Achievement Oscar. But the beloved actor was conspicuously absent. Instead, his close friend Jimmy Stewart stepped up to the podium. Looking back at that historic footage, you can see Stewart usually so poised, barely holding it together. His voice trembled, tears welled in his eyes, and he choked out, "We're very, very proud of you, Coop." The millions watching at home were bewildered by Stewart's raw emotion. What they didn't know was that Cooper was in the final stage of prostate cancer with only weeks left to live. In the studio system of classic Hollywood, an actor's larger-than-life persona was everything. Admitting to physical frailty felt like breaking a sacred promise to the audience. Refusing any public pity, Cooper chose to fade away with his boots on entirely in private. He let Jimmy Stewart deliver the goodbye he couldn't say himself. It wasn't just a friend accepting a trophy. It was a heartbreaking live television eulogy for a dying giant who was watching quietly from his living room. Rock Hudson, the shattered illusion of a Hollywood idol. For 3 decades, Rock Hudson was the gold standard of American masculinity. Broad-shouldered, impossibly handsome, and effortlessly charming, he was the quintessential leading man who swept millions of women off their feet, most famously alongside Doris Day in classic romantic comedies like Pillow Talk. But in July 1985, when Hudson appeared on Day's television show, the nation was left in collective shock. While Doris remained as radiant as ever, beside her stood a gaunt, frail shadow of the man the public adored. The visual contrast was absolutely jarring. Behind his brave smile lay a heartbreaking secret. Diagnosed with AIDS in 1984, Hudson carried the immense weight of a meticulously crafted studio persona during an era of intense social stigma. To admit his illness meant dismantling the romantic illusion that he and the Hollywood machine had spent a lifetime protecting. So he fought to keep up appearances. He took a recurring role on Dynasty and flew secretly to Paris under aliases for experimental medical treatments, desperately trying to outrun a physical decline that simply could not be hidden. His reunion with Doris Day was meant to be a simple favor for a dear friend. Instead, it became a cultural watershed moment. Hudson didn't make a grand confession that day. His fragile frame spoke for him. A manufactured Hollywood dream had collided with a devastating, unscripted reality. Rock Hudson had spent his career giving the public the fantasy they craved. In his final chapter, he forced America to face a crisis it could no longer ignore. Elizabeth Montgomery, the final magic of Samantha Stevens. To the millions of Americans who grew up with bewitched Elizabeth Montgomery was a beloved household presence. With a playful twitch of her nose, she brought effortless instant magic into our living rooms. But in the spring of 1995, during the filming of her final television movie, Deadline for Murder, the reality behind the scenes was far from magical. While playing a sharp, relentless crime reporter, Elizabeth began feeling incredibly drained. At 62, she chalked it up to the grueling 14-hour days of a demanding production. True to her legendary work ethic, she refused to complain, pushing through the exhausting schedule to keep the cameras rolling. Sadly, it wasn't just fatigue. Shortly after filming, Rap doctors delivered a devastating diagnosis: advanced colon cancer. What followed in her final 8 weeks was a masterclass in dignity. Elizabeth didn't seek the spotlight with highly publicized interviews or dramatic press releases. Knowing how the tabloid press would relentlessly camp outside her home to document her physical decline, she made an ironclad choice to close the door. She denied them the spectacle protecting her family and her legacy. When she passed away that May, the sudden news shocked the world. But that quiet exit was exactly what she wanted. Elizabeth Montgomery finished her job, maintained absolute control over her own narrative, and slipped away with the same grace that made America fall in love with her. To generations of Americans, Steve McQueen was the ultimate rebel. Whether soaring over a barbed wire fence on a motorcycle in The Great Escape or burning rubber through San Francisco in Bullitt, he represented speed defiance and absolute control. He was the one man who looked like he could outrun anything. So when McQueen encountered an enemy he couldn't outdrive, his instinct was to fight it entirely on his own terms, out of the spotlight. In late 1979, McQueen was diagnosed with pleural mesothelioma, a brutal cancer linked to asbestos exposure. For the king of cool, showing vulnerability was unthinkable. Hollywood had spent 2 decades marketing him as the ultimate untamed American male. Letting the public watch his health fail meant surrendering the very legend he had so carefully constructed. True to his anti-hero persona, McQueen went off the grid. He quietly traveled to a clinic in Mexico under a pseudonym, seeking alternative treatments. This wasn't just about dodging paparazzi. It was a fiercely independent attempt to outmaneuver an unwinnable situation far from studio executives. When news broke of his passing at just 50 in November 1980, America was utterly blindsided. By keeping his struggle private, McQueen refused to let a hospital bed define him. He chose to vanish while the illusion of his invincibility was still fully intact, ensuring that in our collective memory, the king of cool remains forever undefeated. To generations of Americans, Gene Wilder was a whirlwind of pure imagination. Whether he was having a manic breakdown in The Producers or leading children through a surreal chocolate factory, as Willy Wonka, his genius relied on a sharp, rapid-fire intellect and an unpredictable magical energy. That is what makes his quiet exit so deeply moving. For 3 years before his passing in 2016, Wilder lived with Alzheimer's disease, yet he chose to keep his diagnosis entirely hidden from the world. In Hollywood, stars often hide illnesses to protect their careers or vanity. Wilder did it out of pure love. According to his family, he couldn't bear the thought of a child looking at him, seeing Willy Wonka, and feeling the sadness of witnessing their hero struggle with confusion or cognitive decline. He refused to let the magic he spent a lifetime creating be overshadowed by the tragedy of a cruel disease. So Wilder chose the heavy isolation of keeping his secret. He stepped away from the spotlight, spending his final years quietly at home with his family. He bore the weight of his condition in private to ensure his legendary image remained untouched by sorrow. Gene Wilder didn't just bring joy to our screens. He made the ultimate selfless sacrifice to protect that joy for the audiences who loved him. He left us with the magic fully intact. To generations of Americans, Paul Newman was the pinnacle of effortlessly cool masculinity. Yet despite 50 years of global stardom, he always maintained a deliberate distance from the Hollywood machine, famously preferring the grit of racing cars and the quiet impact of his massive charity food company over the superficiality of red carpets. So when Newman was diagnosed with lung cancer in his early 80s, his response was perfectly in character. He refused to grant the public access to his mortality. By the spring of 2008, paparazzi photos emerged of an uncharacteristically frail Newman. As media pressure mounted for a formal explanation, the standard Hollywood protocol would have been a polished press release. Newman flatly refused to play along. He instructed his team to aggressively deny the rumors, sometimes using sharp sarcasm to deflect the intrusive inquiries. This wasn't a man in denial, nor was he protecting a studio contract. It was a final act of profound defiance. Newman understood that the tabloids felt entitled to his final days, eager to turn his physical decline into a public death watch. By denying them the truth, he stripped the media of their power to narrate his exit. He had already given the world his iconic performances, his striking blue eyes, and hundreds of millions of dollars in charity. But he drew an uncompromising line at his death. Paul Newman forced the world to respect his boundaries one last time, ensuring his final chapter belonged solely to him and his family. To generations of classic television viewers, Raymond Burr was an immovable force. Whether dominating the courtroom as Perry Mason or solving crimes from a wheelchair as Ironside, his screen presence was built on absolute, unshakable authority. He simply was not a man who looked vulnerable. When renal cancer began spreading through his body in the early 1990s, Burr applied that same ironclad control to his final days. He didn't just hide his terminal illness from the press. He hid it from his closest friends. In his final months, knowing his time was short, Burr hosted a series of lavish parties at his California ranch. His colleagues ate, drank, and laughed, completely unaware that their generous host was secretly orchestrating his own living wake. Burr chose to carry the immense emotional weight of these farewells alone. He refused to let his final interactions be overshadowed by awkward grief or pity. He simply wanted to see his loved ones happy one last time. Even as his strength ebbed, he dragged himself to the set to film his final television movie, using a wheelchair off-camera to conserve every ounce of energy. To the very end, Raymond Burr dictated exactly how he would be remembered. Not as a patient fading away, but as the steadfast, commanding figure at the head of the table in complete control until the final director called cut. To generations of television viewers, Jerry Orbach was the beating heart of New York City. As the beloved detective Lenny Briscoe on Law & Order, his world-weary posture, iconic trench coat, and endless supply of deadpan one-liners made him a permanent fixture in American living rooms. On screen, he seemed like the kind of tough, gritty detective who could stand in the freezing rain at a crime scene all night without even noticing the cold. But that tireless stamina masked a decade-long battle. In 1994, just as his legendary run on the show was taking off, Orbach was diagnosed with prostate cancer. The shooting schedule for a network drama is notoriously brutal, demanding grueling 14-hour days. For an actor in his 60s facing cancer, stepping aside would have been the logical choice. Instead, Orbach made a staggering decision. He kept his diagnosis strictly private and stayed on the job for 10 years. He didn't hide his illness out of vanity, but out of the proud, old-school work ethic of a Broadway veteran. To Orbach, the ultimate sin was missing a curtain call. He scheduled his grueling treatments during his off hours, then walked right back onto the pavement to hit his marks. In his final seasons, viewers might have noticed Briscoe leaning a bit heavier against a precinct desk, which only seemed to add to his character's seasoned charm. In truth, we were witnessing a masterclass in sheer human endurance from an irreplaceable actor who simply refused to let his body dictate his retirement. Thank you for watching today's video. If you find the content interesting or useful, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the latest videos. Your support is the biggest motivation for us to continue creating better quality content every day. What do you think about today's topic? Leave a comment below so we can discuss it together. See you in the next video. Have a great day.